Hi, everyone.
Hey, Holly. All right, we can just jump right into the agenda. I'll share my screen to help illustrate. So I was talking with Sam White and Sam Kerr the other week, and the compliance team is releasing a feature around integrating an enforced pipeline. And Sam brought up some really good feedback that he just identified. This is something I hadn't thought about when I initially designed the feature. Essentially, you're to like simplify this as much as I can, you're forcing a pipeline to show up in all of your projects that have a specific compliance framework assigned to them. So that's a very powerful feature that a lot of customers are excited about. What I could see being confusing about this to the users is when you look at a pipeline itself, you won't be able to easily distinguish what came from like maybe your project's YAML file versus this like compliance YAML file. So I was thinking through just some simple ideas that we could do to try and differentiate the components from each other, just so that there's some sort of recognition for the user to know that it didn't come from their project, but rather it came from this authoritative source that enforced it. And I was curious if anybody had any other ideas of UI components I could use, or a different way to differentiate what pipeline came from a project or what pipeline came from this compliance source. I was thinking we could use a label because it's system generated, but then that takes up more UI space, and these like little pill objects in the pipeline aren't exactly the most flexible in terms of that. So it's a pretty narrow feedback request, but I was curious if anybody had any other ideas there. And to answer Mike's question, yes, this is the initial problem we're trying to solve. It's the parent epic for how this compliance pipeline configuration works. So there's a lot of things in there, but this kind of shows how that compliance YAML file combines with this YAML file, and then it shows up here, but users probably won't know why it shows up there today.
I missed the first part of your presentation there, Austin. I'm sorry. I was putting in a note to the agenda, but I see your question about some other ways to differentiate versus labels versus icons. And I came in right about the time that you were talking about the little pills and how they're not super flexible. Do you mind just recapping a little bit? I apologize.
Yeah. So I think what's easiest to illustrate this is when your pipeline runs, you have some compliance specific jobs that are forced in there. So example are these two. The only way you know that is because someone labeled them with the word compliance in front of it. So I was thinking of introducing a UI element to try and distinguish which of these pipeline jobs came from that specific file that's different. So this is like your project one. This is your group defined one, essentially. That way users know when I'm reviewing pipelines, which jobs are enforced and which ones do we have control over. I hadn't thought about this problem initially when I was designing the solution, but another PM brought back the feedback. They're like, hey, this is confusing. These jobs just showed up in the pipeline. I had no idea why.
So we're trying to help them understand the difference between a project versus a group in this context, which also helps them to understand the level of control they have over the situation.
Kind of. We're trying to help them distinguish the YAML file that they can define within their own project versus the YAML file that is enforcing new jobs in their pipeline.
Got it. Thank you.
I thought the icon works, but it like masks the detail behind it, which I don't love. I'd rather it just be directly readable on the screen, but then there's just not a whole lot of space in some of these objects. So I don't know, that balance between writing everything out on the page and then using iconography to simplify information.
I'm not proposing that we change this necessarily, but just out of curiosity, any idea why we have the little pills kind of designed as we do in this, and why we use those in this situation?
You know, I think I'd have to ask Vilika about that. I think she handles the pipeline design, at least like the visualization of it and stuff. I don't really know why it's like it.
I feel like it's a pattern I've seen before in other applications that are addressing some similar problems. So maybe that's partly why.
Yeah, it could be.
I just realized that so this kind of requires a lot of knowledge of how CI is set up in GitLab. So you'd have to know that if you want to see the CI configuration, you'd have to go to the repository and go to the dot whatever YAML file. What is it?
Yeah.
Or is it pipeline.yaml? That's it. So I just realized that this might be an opportunity to make it easier to navigate, to view the pipeline configuration. And then we don't have to distinguish whether it's a compliance pipeline or not with an icon. We could have, I don't know, some way to view the YAML file that defined that pipeline. And so if let's say it's a dropdown, I don't know what it would be, but you click it and it would actually be able to read compliance.gitlab.ci.yaml. And I think that provides more visibility into how these pipelines are constructed and what's happening under the hood. And so yeah, I'm just saying this might be an opportunity to improve that whole experience around finding the configuration for a pipeline.
Yeah, because like you'd have to also figure out where did website build come from versus compliance test in this scenario. And you're saying it would be useful to directly see which file it came from, maybe in a drop down or some form of like popover or something that highlights where that specific thing was ran.
Yeah,
possible.
Rather than the icon. When you were designing this, the problem with the icon is now we're taking up room to actually see what the name of the job is. So yeah. Why is it important to distinguish that it's a compliance related pipeline?
So what will potentially be confusing to a developer that is managing the pipeline itself is they might not understand why these jobs have appeared. Because if they go to their projects like GitLab CI YAML that they have access to, they can see all the jobs defined in there, but those jobs won't be listed in there. The one like these other ones, those are listed in a different project in this special CI file. And then they get merged together. So they might not understand why are these things in the pipeline.
Yeah, how is that problem identified? How did it become a problem to solve?
It became a problem to solve because there were project maintainers or really like group owners that needed to enforce a requirement in their teams. The only way they could really enforce something today was put like a pipeline template in for projects and then just hope that developers wouldn't circumvent it, except then people did start circumventing it. So then it became a hassle to try and manage every project's CI file and make sure that they're including these important jobs, whatever they may be. They can vary greatly by organization and company.
Yeah, so I had similar questions. I guess that, and you answered this, but just verbalizing, the main problem is that someone who's working on a change will see some pipelines appear. They don't know why. And I imagine if they have issues with them, right? Like if they're failing, they also would need to know like how does these fit in? Who can answer questions about whatever's happening here that's failing, right? That would be another part of the workflow. So we answer that. And then I asked the question, why would someone need to know where a pipeline came from? But I think it's related to that too, right? Especially in case of failures or questions, they need to know sort of where to go. So I really like Mike's idea of, can we tie this closer together to where the source is in some way? Maybe it doesn't need to be within each specific pill, but maybe there's something that just like literally has the URL to where these different files are.
Yeah, and I'll have to look into how like the permissions would play out with that too, because to like get this feature to work, we had to use some principles to allow us to just create this isolated project. And I don't know who's going to be able to have access to read these. So I think if an organization sets this compliance project to be private, they might be able to keep people from seeing what this file is, which would be very annoying. But I'm not positive.
Depends on a lot of things. So we, a lot of the reason why GitLab works so well is because of transparency, that things are open by default. So we know we could learn at some point through solution validation that compliance managers are in fact going to block or lock that down so people can't see it. It'd be interesting to know, you know, if that is a problem to solve, or if it's okay to know that your build is constrained by a SOX compliance rule or whatever.
Yeah, totally. And I'll recognize this is not a blocking issue. It was more just some initial feedback we're hearing as we're starting to roll out the feature itself from customers and our PMs interfacing with different customers, that they're getting a little bit confused. So I was just trying to explore some ideas of how we could preemptively try and solve them with some minor changes while we think about a bigger solution to improve the entire like customer journey or user journey around this whole feature, because I'll totally acknowledge it is a good bit of manual effort to get things set up first time and can be very confusing. But okay, yeah, I think that gives me a few ideas to jump into. So I appreciate you all helping me try and think through that.
As someone who, I just want to ask Melissa a question really quick. As someone who has familiarity with like access preferences in organizations, could you see an organization wanting to block that someone can see a configuration like that, like a compliance related configuration or something?
Definitely editing, but I would hope people would want everyone to be able to see it, right? Especially if, like I said, in case of investigating failures, I would hope they would want people to be able to self-serve with basic level troubleshooting, right? Which includes being able to see what's happening.
I love that, self-serve with basic level troubleshooting. So it'd be view only. Okay, awesome, thanks. Sorry, Holly, I squeezed that last question in.
No, that is totally fine. I'm hoping that mine will be, I'm hoping that it'll be kind of a simple conversation, but it might feel more complex. I'm looking for some feedback on some icons, and I'll go ahead and share my screen just to kind of show specifically where we are in this conversation. We're looking to do issue types. Can you all see my screen? Perfect, thank you. So we're looking to offer issue types. We already have some issue types. We have an issue and then we have incidents, but we're looking to expand on those. And one of the things that we needed to decide on was some ways to differentiate between those different types. Specifically, we're looking at icons for the board context, because when you're looking at a board, bugs in particular were one of the things that we had heard feedback from users. They need to be able to quickly just scan the board and see what's a bug versus what isn't, so that they know how to prioritize. So we've been exploring some ideas. I am the first to admit that iconography and illustrations are not my strong suit. So there is no no offense taken here if anybody struggles with any of these, but I've pulled in Jeremy and Amelia actually had been working on this as well. So we've kind of the three of us been collaborating on it. But the four in question that we were looking at initially were features, enhancements, technical debt, and bugs. Bugs we already had an icon for, though I'm not sure exactly how we're using those yet. So that's another reason I pulled in Jeremy. Feature, enhancement, and technical debt, though, are the ones that are a little bit more in question. So I spent a lot of time looking at how other people are representing these icons and these concepts in various products. And after talking with Mike Nichols, who was my former UX buddy, he said that he liked how Slack did a little gift to indicate a feature. And I kind of like that as well. It felt like more of a kind of positive proposal that something new has been created. And we did a lot of research with users in terms of what the specific verbiage is that we're using for these. And to them, a feature could be either something new or it could be adding on to something existing. In other words, an entirely new thing or adding on. Enhancement, however, was always obviously adding on. So went with a little present for feature, kind of a bar chart showing an upward arrow in addition to the lines for enhancement, and then technical debt. There was a lot of struggle with this one, and this is the one that we're stuck on the most. So in this case, I went with our little weight icon and kind of a little scale tipping down. Where this has gone is Jeremy has proposed maybe some additional ways to explore. I think this was for feature. He's proposing the star, and enhancement, maybe a magic wand. I love the magic wand. The star, I told him I struggled with a little bit because there are so many different ideas already tied to the icon of a star in terms of ratings and favorites and things like that, that I kind of struggle with that one. And then Amelia was showing some screens from Jira, I believe. And then I created this one as just, I had seen someone else had done something kind of similar for technical debt. And we had some discussions surrounding concerns with that one. And maybe for some folks, it might feel a little anxious almost because you've got this kind of symbol. So we are still talking through that. Amelia had suggested maybe something with code. And this was another idea that I had originally of the code symbol kind of weighing something down. And then these were the last two it looks like she had proposed on Friday, just to further explore that. But it's tricky because technical debt isn't a positive thing, and we don't necessarily want to promote it as such. It's something that, it's debt. Debt's not always a good thing. It's something that we need to clarify as being potentially problematic. However, we want to be sure that we're doing it in a way that is thoughtful and that makes sense to the majority of our users, and is small and simple and can be fit into little spaces throughout the product. So would love any thoughts, feedback that y'all have about any of the icons, but that's the one that we're kind of stuck on the most currently. So welcome any thoughts.
Do I have the first comment? Oh, okay. Yeah, one idea is that we always show the text label next to it, and then we don't have to worry too much about whether the symbol is universally recognized. And so yeah, I just want to throw that out there. And then Austin, I think you have a comment.
Yeah, it's probably similar to what Amelia shared, but I was just looking at what Jira did to differentiate theirs. They aren't necessarily the most obvious right off the bat, like a bug is just a circle dot. Yeah. I think those are even older than what they're using now. So I added a screenshot of that. But to me, because these are usually used in small spaces, like probably staying 16 by 16 pixels, maybe 24 by 24 at the largest, simple just works the best here. And maybe even things that don't necessarily correlate perfectly, like just a circle for a bug could be totally fine. So maybe the icon doesn't have to tell the whole story, and it's pretty easy to discover if something's a bug in Jira versus a story, you hover over it and there's a little tooltip that tells you that that icon is a story versus a task versus a bug. So it uses multiple formats to communicate something. So they're using a combination of color and iconography to communicate something with the ability to then look into it and find out specifically what it is. But I loved all of the creative ideas that I saw. I think some of them maybe were just a little too much for something so tiny, you know,
Yeah.
Which I think is great. You have Jeremy in there and he'll definitely help you find something way more simple. He's been great about that.
Yeah, he's very good at it, and I have a tendency to overcomplicate those because I'm trying to think of.
Yep.
It's ironic because I'm trying to think of the most simple way to present it, and yet I'm overcomplicating it while trying to simplify it. But that's, again, it's not my strong suit; it's his strong suit, so that's why I pulled him in. But thank you for that feedback, Austin. That is great feedback. And to Mike's point, I completely agree that I don't want to just show an icon. I want to show some other way to also clearly read. So we're not just showing visuals or color to differentiate between the different types of things, but also showing a clear label as well. So maybe we could go even more simple and small, keeping that in mind. We'll just need to be sure that we're also addressing the different ways that we can show a label in addition to the icon in the various places in the product. With the board, again, being the #1 concern, just because it's already so full of stuff. So thank you both for the feedback. I appreciate it. Melissa, any thoughts on your part? No problem if not, but just wanted to ask.
No, yeah, I actually had a more probably unrelated question, but is there somewhere where I can see the definitions for each of these? Like what is a technical debt, what is, etc. I clicked around and I couldn't really find it.
I don't think it's in that particular issue. There's a separate one. Let me see here. And I'm happy to put it in the agenda. I think it is maybe in this one. I'll find it and put it in the agenda, but we do have one. Yeah, we do have one. I'll put it in there. Thanks.
Thank you.
Of course.
And then maybe y'all will throw tomatoes at me, but I'll say, like, yes, it's important to pick an icon that is initially kind of, indicative of what it is, but I agree if you put the text next to it. And also it's something that people get used to whatever we give them, right? So it's important to sort of like at first glance, and some of the like having text next to it, a lot of times hover over so that you see like what's behind it, right? But I kind of feel like it's something that's learnable, right? So that's my perspective.
I agree. That's a good point too.
Reinforcing it over and over again over time, people will start to recognize the symbol more. Yeah, I think I agree, as long as the label is there too. Tomatoes. I'm kidding. The inverse treatment threw me off. I had to really squint to decipher it. Yeah, just extra shapes that convey extra meaning that my brain has to process. And since I have a really slow moving brain, I have the advantage of being able to observe it in real time. So that was my experience around it. So the quickest example I could find was actually the participants area in our Google Doc. And I realized, I honestly don't know what that means. It's a guy with I don't know what that is.
It's talking. It's like a little bubble.
Do you want to share your screen? I can stop sharing if you'd like.
Yeah, it's in. I mean, if you look at the top of the Google Doc, next to people's faces.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
Yeah, honestly, that's not a great icon choice. But my point is the treatment. It's easier just to see the shapes when they're on a positive background instead of inversed.
Agree. That was actually something I took from the original. So let me scroll up to the top. Originally, Amelia had created these 3, which we decided not to move forward with feature flags for now. So that one can be discarded. But in her research, she had an inverse option. And I honestly assumed that that was something that we had maybe in our template to start creating these kinds of icons. But that's a good point, because I agree with you. I mean, I find the items on the left to be a lot easier to kind of process than the items on the right. And it becomes more complex from a design perspective because you have to think through like, what does the inverse of this look like and does it still make sense? I don't know if there are places though that we're using one versus the other, you know, but still have the same icon represented. It's just in different ways. So that's something else that we need to talk through as part of this research. But
And
thank
the
you
dark
all.
themes, maybe that's the only
I
thing.
was wondering that too, perhaps. And that's,
I missed the question, or I missed what Melissa said.
Oh, that maybe in the dark themes is where we use the inverse icons. I don't use the dark theme for GitLab.
Yeah,
I don't either.
I did while I was kind of testing it, and then I don't know if it automatically switched, I'd probably use it more. But yeah.
Well, thank you all. This has been super helpful feedback, and I think there's value in exploring maybe some other ways that we can continue to simplify these, and just be sure to include the labels in the various places that we show it. And I'll find that issue, Melissa, and put it in the agenda as well. You know, honestly, though, I'm glad you asked, because the one that I thought it was listed in lists the names, but it doesn't list the definitions. So there's either another one out there that I'm missing, or we might still need to put those actually in the documentation. So it's good that you brought it up.
Well, we still have a couple minutes left. I was wondering, what are y'all looking forward to this week?
Synthesizing my jobs to be done user interview data. There were so many good insights. I can't wait to just kind of pull it all into a place and start sifting through it.
That's a good question. I don't know what I'm looking forward to yet. Another good week of work. I don't know. We'll see. I haven't even responded to Geekbot asking me what I'm doing today, so I should probably do that first.
I have a presentation with the cab, so I'm looking forward to that. I haven't done one yet since I've been here.
Oh, that's a good one. I have a few coffee chats this week that I'm looking forward to. I'm going to catch up with Daniel and Emily, who are some of our more recent product designers, and check in on how they're going.
Cool. I'm looking forward to, yeah, I know, right? I can't just ask and then not participate. I'm hoping I can get a more final-ish draft of the competitor evaluation guide that I want to put in the handbook. So I'm hoping to have that more solidified like by tomorrow or Wednesday, so I can do a handbook contribution draft and make it feel more like real rather than just kind of a kitchen sink of ideas. So I'm looking forward to solidifying the competitor evaluation draft. And I have a deadline because it's an OKR. So deadlines are good.
You still need more feedback, or do you have enough to keep going forward?
I got a lot of feedback last week, and I need to just dive in and look for patterns there. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah. But I mean, you can still, if you have ideas, feel free to hop in there. I don't have the link handy, but it's in the agenda from last week's UX Weekly.
Cool. All right. Meeting adjourned.
Good review, everyone. See you later.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great week.